Hello, everyone. Welcome to Universal Recovery. Good evening if you're in the UK. Good morning if you're in California and wherever else you are. We're so incredibly grateful that you're here with us. My name is TJ Woodward. I'm here with the incredible Saf Buxy. Welcome to our show and welcome, Saf. How are you doing today?
Hi, TJ. Yeah, hi. I mean, obviously, last week was very traumatic for me. But you know what? I've come in a blazer today, TJ, and you haven't. It's normally you're the smart one with the jacket and the prim and proper, and today you come casual, and I've come in a blazer. But that's fine. That's fine.
That's the way it is, right?
You still look beautiful.
No, and that's the beauty of doing a live show.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Yeah, it was a tough week last week, of course, with the passing of Zach and Nat. But obviously, the show must go on, and we want to give a message of hope and do what we do, TJ. So yeah, I'm a lot better. But thank you very much.
Thank you. And for anyone who's watching that isn't aware, we did a show last week. Saf lost one of his closest friends, and we did a show that was very raw and in the moment about grief and loss. And I want to say thank you for your vulnerability, Saf, for showing up and really demonstrating, how we can show up in the world and be present with what's happening. Whether we consider that to be something positive, negative, or anywhere in between. And that's one of the reasons I love doing this show every week.
Yeah, thank you, TJ. It's funny you say that because I read a quote. It's a Buddhist quote, and I want to share that with you, if I may, and see if you can resonate. And I think it makes a lot of sense. It's from Lao Tzu. I'm sure you know who that is. And the quote is, "If you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future. If you are at peace, you are living in the present."
I love that quote. It's one of my favorites. And I am reminded of, I hear people sometimes say everything is going to be okay, but that's really a future focused reality or a future focused thought. And so I have actually changed that. Some years ago, I realized I kind of changed that over to I am perfectly okay in this moment. And that's something that has taken me through a lot of different experiences, just to remind myself, put my hand on my heart, feel what is present, and remind myself I am perfectly okay right now.
And I think it's important to try and stay in the moment, stay in the here and now, because we can't change the past. And unless you're Nostradamus, you can't predict the future. So the only thing we have control over is what we're doing right now, I guess.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you say we can't change the past. I want to offer something here because I remember when I first got into recovery and I first started along a spiritual path, or at least I was conscious that I was on a spiritual path. I remember calling my sisters and asking them about the events of our past. And I was so kind of shocked, actually, because I was aware they would have a different version of the story. But what I didn't realize is that we had totally different stories. And so I started playing with the idea that maybe the past isn't so solid. It was really my perception of the past. Now, I'm not saying this in a way to negate my experience or pretend like something didn't happen, but I quickly realized that we had totally different stories about our childhood and therefore very, very different core false beliefs about ourselves and the world, and therefore very different ways of being in the world. So even though it's on one level of reality, it is true we can't change the past. On another level, when I make peace with the past, it changes it. It really does change the experience of what happened. And so we eyewitnesses are one of the least, accurate. So who am I to say that I can't change the past? Because maybe we can.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's more from a spiritual and a mental sense as opposed to a physical sense. Of course it is. But I love that. And it comes back to the saying or the mindset where, how did the past serve us today?
Right.
Because and rather than resentment, rather than staying in that rut, rather than being in that cocoon of the trauma or whatever it may be of the past, and we're talking just on a negative level here, I guess on a positive level as well, but whatever it is, how did it serve us today? Because I think unless we can see the benefits today or even the benefits then, I don't think we can move on and live an inspiring and fulfilling life. So it's changing our mindset and coming to peace with the past. Now, when you say coming to peace, TJ, is that with the acceptance as well? Is that accepting what happened? I mean, are they the same thing, coming to peace and acceptance in this instinct?
For me, I think language is always limited, right? And at some point, I shifted the conversation from forgiveness to making peace. And the funny thing about writing a book, even Conscious Recovery, which I know we're talking about today, when I wrote that book, I think I was still using forgiveness. And there was a light bulb moment that I had where I realized that forgiveness, at least for the most part in our culture, is still deeply entrenched in good, bad, right, wrong paradigm. And I know you and I love having that conversation about oneness and duality. And so I realized at some point, working with clients specifically, where it was difficult for people to move on from something from the past. And they were on some level thinking, oh, I have to forgive this person, or I have to forgive myself. And when I started shifting it to, is it possible to have peace regardless of what happened? And then, as you said, it's interesting because it's nuanced, right? I think it is important to realize some of the most painful experiences of my life have become the most useful. I had sexual trauma in my past. I've had all kinds of different traumatic experiences. And as painful as they were, they have become part of making me who I am in terms of being able to work with people. The key, and I think we talked about this last week, Sam, is we don't want to do a bypass where it's like, oh, everything's fine. That was great. Let me look for the good in it. I think it's that and. Yes, this and, not this or.
And I guess that sort of sums up conscious recovery. It's not this or, it's this and. It's an addition to what other modalities are out there. I mean, I'll be reading your book. And guys, if you haven't read Conscious Recovery, please get it. Conscious Recovery by TJ himself, TJ Woodward. It's an incredible book. And I don't think it just, I mean, okay, the main focus of the book and the reason behind it is addiction. Of course it is. But I think you can apply that in everything in life. It's a book of life. It's a life-changing book. That's what it is. So I definitely encourage you to get it. I mean, I've got it on my phone, so it's with me wherever I go. But we wanted to talk a bit about conscious recovery today, and I guess we always talk a little bit about it every week. But I want to. What is conscious recovery? I mean, I think I'll let you take the lead on this, TJ, because this is your project, this is your creation, this is your philosophy, and you're the best. Even though I'm learning a lot, and the more I read and the more courses I do of yours, and the more we engage with each other, I will get there for sure, because I absolutely love it. But over to you when it comes to conscious recovery, for sure.
Well, thank you. And I really appreciate your kind words, Saf. I think I can answer it in two different ways. One, I want to start with what the foundational principle of conscious recovery is, and that is underneath all addictive behavior is an essential self that is whole and perfect. This came from my own recovery and working in the addiction treatment field, where I realized there was such a strong focus on brokenness. What's wrong with the person? We diagnose and treat. In some recovery circles, we look at character defects. What's wrong with me? I'm selfish. And I think that all has a place. And so again, this is not this or that, but in addition to that, what if there is a place within us that's unharmable, right? And that became the foundational principle. Because for me, what I realized is I couldn't do some of the deeper healing work that is required. To me, what's required to be in long-term recovery, and I don't know what long-term is. I used to think it was 5 years, and then I got 5 years sober, and then I thought it was 10 years, and I got 10 years sober, and suddenly it's like, I don't even know what long-term recovery means. But what I do know in my own experience is the underlying deeper root causes of addiction must be addressed in order to maintain or to achieve sobriety. And so that's the second piece of conscious recovery. One is that unharmable self that we know is there underneath all the addictive behavior. And then the second part of conscious recovery is how do we get down to the deep root causes that actually drive the addiction rather than just continuing to look at symptoms. Drinking or using or having sex or gambling or whatever we're doing that we might consider addictive is not the problem. It's the solution, it's the symptom. And so conscious recovery helps us get down to the unconscious beliefs, ideas, and really it's the frequency we're holding, looking at the deeper root causes and how we actually heal that so we can move into long-term sobriety.
And again, I think with the 12 steps, that comes back to step 4 and step 5, and looking at your, not just your defects, but looking at, when you're making amends and looking at the wrongs that you've done and stuff. But some people might say, TJ, and I want to put it out there because just in case someone's thinking this, can that not be dangerous, looking back at events that you may not want to revisit?
So there are a couple of things I'll say. One, I think it's very important that we heal the past or it's with us in the present. And I love that we started with that Lao Tzu quote because, if I am living in the past, that quote again, I'm depressed. If I'm living in the future, I'm anxious, right? And so it's about being in the here and now. But in my experience, what that doesn't mean is let's pretend like the past isn't there. I have a family member, I'll say that, who really doesn't want to look at the past, right? That's all behind us. Let's stay in the moment. And although that's a spiritual truth, there's also, in my experience, the need for us to heal some of that, to make peace with some of that, because otherwise we're just bringing it into our present. So if I haven't resolved the past, it's just alive within me in this moment. So I think it is important. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I think makes conscious recovery somewhat different than 12-step, just to name it, is that we're not only looking at the resentments and our own actions. That is important. Again, it's not this or that. It's also what happened, right? What happened in our past that has created this idea that we're broken? What are the traumatic experiences? How did we disconnect from our true nature? What is the shame we're carrying? And if we don't heal that, we're going to eventually want to find someone or something outside of ourselves to bring relief. In other words, we're going to go back to our drinking, our using, or whatever our addiction is if we don't heal that.
So basically what you're saying is look at the past, look at the reasons, because I'm putting myself in the situation why I started drinking, and I know the reasons why I started drinking, and my story because of the abuse of all types, but at that time I didn't know.
Right.
At that time, it's only now and coming into recovery and leading this new way of life and getting into the services and studying and talking with amazing people like yourself and reflecting, I know. But at that time, you don't know. And I look back at that time and I think, well, there was a lot of fear. For me, it felt like surviving. For me, it felt like being wanted, being loved by drinking, but also, and I know you don't like this coping mechanism word or escape, but we're going to say your word. It was a brilliant strategy at that time to deal with what one was dealing with.
Right. And it's interesting that you're saying this because I think it is important to name that we're not necessarily, or even most often, talking about conscious awareness that we're using drugs or alcohol to manage some of the underlying issues. In other words, it wasn't like I was walking around saying, oh my gosh, I have all this unresolved trauma. I'm so disconnected from my true nature. I have so much shame. And so I'm looking for relief. No, someone handed me weed. I used it. It was fun. It was wonderful. It was a great experience. I wanted more. It wasn't until I was, when I got deeper into my addiction, I started realizing, oh, this is really, there's something about this that's me wanting to escape. It wasn't really until I got into recovery and in some time in recovery, a couple of years in recovery, when I started to realize, oh, wow, I wasn't only drinking and using because it was fun. I was also using it to escape, to numb out, to change the way I felt. And so, yes, it's true. It is a coping mechanism, but I have changed that language to brilliant strategy. And the reason is I think it is easy for us to go into what's wrong about addiction. And if we do that, then we bring more shame to the person. And so start to frame it as, okay, so was it once brilliant? Yeah, I mean, it was brilliant. When I was 13, 14, 15, 16, drugs and alcohol were brilliant. They helped save my life. And then, of course, it started causing problems, and then it was no longer serving me. So I think taking the shame out of the addiction is a really important step.
I think you say an important point. I mean, obviously, Dr. Gabor Matte says it all the time, and even a guy that I know very well, Dr. John DeMartini, who's not an addict per se, but the first questions that they ask is, what's good about it? Yeah. And then people look at them and say, well, nothing's good about it. Well, there must be something good about it for you to do it. But what they're not actually asking, what are the benefits about it? They're asking, why did you do it? Why do you think you did it? What did it do for you? And here we come as it was a brilliant strategy. Brilliant strategy to what? And that's when you start exploring the reasons.
You know, I'm reminded of my good friend, Dr. Christine Pappas. She facilitated a group. When I first met her, I brought her into a treatment program I was working at and asked her to facilitate a group. And her specialty is eating disorder. And I had some experience working with people with eating disorders. And on some level, each addiction is unique, but on another level, it's all the same experience. And her check-in question with the clients was so powerful. It just shot right through me. She said, for check-in, I want you to tell me, what are you hungry for? And in the framework of eating disorder, I was like, oh my gosh, that question is so deep when I sit with it. I was hungry for connection. I was hungry for love. Like you said, Saf, I was hungry to feel whole again. And I was trying to get that outside of myself, and I found it, right? Drugs brought that to me. Alcohol brought that to me. Ecstasy certainly brought that to me. And so I started chasing that. And of course, there's nothing inherently wrong with searching outside of ourselves for that sense of love and connection. The issue is it really doesn't permanently work, right? Because the outer world is always coming and going. Relationships come and go. Jobs come and go. Places we live come and go. And so when we connect with or reconnect with our true nature, then we're no longer trying to find love outside of ourselves. We're connecting with the love that we are. And that's a really different way of being here on planet Earth, quite frankly.
And we talk about it week in, week out. It's all about connection. It's all about connection. Because why else would someone... Okay, let me ask you another question then. Because there's people out there who take a drink now and again. There's people out there who might have the odd spliff. They might have a couple of lines once in a while. Are they disconnected?
You know, it's interesting. As you were talking, I was hearkening back to sometime in the 80s. I had a job, and I met this woman that worked with me. And she said, I have about a quarter glass of wine and one cigarette every evening when I get home from work. But that's all I do. It just helps take the edge off. And I was thinking, wow, I don't think I could do that, right? So, you know, in some ways, some of what we look at with addiction is mysterious. I quickly realized, you know, because I remember early in my journey, I was very focused on trying to figure it out. What makes a person an addict or an alcoholic, and what's the label, and where's the line? And then I realized, wow, it's maybe more mysterious than I ever realized. Even her quarter glass of wine and her cigarette, sure, that could be... someone might call that addictive, right? She did it every evening, and she said she wanted it every evening, but it obviously wasn't causing any problems in her life. So who are we to say what it is? I know for myself that really it wasn't about the drinking and using. It was really about the sense of brokenness and disconnection. And that's why I identify the two of the root causes of addiction as spiritual disconnection and toxic shame. And I reached a point where I felt so empty inside, Saf, and I was trying so hard to try to find something to fill that void, and it just wasn't working for me. And I think that's how I was able to identify it's an addiction. Not so much what was happening, not so much what I lost. All that was happening too, but it was really more about like, oh my gosh, I can't just keep trying to find someone or something outside of me. At some point, I had to move back within and reconnect with myself.
So for you, it's what was missing in your life,
Yeah.
not so much what you were gaining from it.
Yeah, I think there was definitely a line that was crossed for me, and I realized that I just kept trying to feed myself from the outside, right? That's why I love that question, what are you hungry for? Because that's to me, that's what addiction is in some way. I'm so hungry and I want something to try to soothe this experience of disconnection.
And I guess you learned this on reflection. At the time, you didn't know. I mean, at the time, because all the years that I was doing, I never once believed that I was an addict or I had a problem. And you hear that quite a lot in people who come into recovery. Sometimes, even as you know my story, even to the day when I went to get help after 33 years, even that day I didn't believe I had a problem. Which is quite strange after in my case, all the destruction that I caused, and not just to my own health and my own family, but to everyone around me, and the fact that I was using or doing things not necessarily every day, but regularly, heavily, I still didn't believe I had a problem.
Yeah, and what if we took the shame out of it, right? Because, I could also say maybe you didn't have a problem. You just were having a solution that was no longer serving you, right? That's, like the brilliance of the addiction or the substance use or whatever it was no longer serving you. And there was that sense of, gosh, I don't know what it is, but it's out of alignment. That was my story. I didn't know quite what it was. I was in therapy talking about my relationship issues and my communication skills. I definitely was not telling my therapist all the drugs I was using. That was definitely buried in the shadow. And I don't think I was even at a place I could have really acknowledged it. And so, yes, it's true. I wasn't able to see the problem with it. And I think for me, it is because if I acknowledge that, I'm going to have to do something about it, right? Because if I really get honest and tell at least one person what's really happening for me, I might have to change. And at that time, change was terrifying for me. Isn't it interesting though, Saf? My life felt really miserable. I felt really disconnected, but I wasn't going to change anything because somehow I was still clinging to that. And it's just fascinating.
And it goes back to what you're saying, that it's not the problem, it's the solution
Right.
to the problem. And the problem may be trauma, maybe escape, maybe this, maybe that. And that sort of just confirms that it's not the problem. It is the strategy, the solution that people use to a problem. And many of the times they don't even realize they're doing it. I didn't realize I was doing it to get away, but it did make me feel connected in one way. It did make me feel. So I'm interested to hear your definition actually of addiction, and we'll come to what the addictive self is, because you talk a lot about the addicted self. I mean, obviously in your book you've quoted an Eckhart Tolle quote at the beginning of Addicted Self. Do you know that off by heart, or shall I read it? Or
That would be great.
yeah. I mean, let me just put it on this way so I can see it. You've every addiction arises from an unconscious refusal to face and move through your own pain. And we've been talking about that, haven't we? Every addiction starts with pain and ends with pain. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the substance you are addicted to, and I'm going to say further, whatever substance or behavior that you're addicted to, alcohol, food, legal or illegal drugs, or a person, okay, here we go, you are using something or somebody to cover up your pain. And that's from Eckhart Tolle.
Well, Eckhart Tolle is one wise man, so I lean into that, and that's definitely my experience, right? It really is on some level about escaping from or changing that pain. Eckhart Tolle in his book, A New Earth, talks about the pain body, and what he's talking about is that wounded self. And so many of us believe that's who we are. And honestly, I think that's why people struggle, I'll use the word struggle, with healing their addiction, because if I believe I am my wounds, they're really hard to look at, right? So if I start to acknowledge, as Eckhart Tolle so brilliantly says, I'm using this to manage the pain. And if I take the good and bad out of it, because in conscious recovery, one of the 5 principles, one of them is addiction itself is not the problem. It's a strategy that has lost its effectiveness. In other words, it's not a strategy that's bad or wrong. It's just no longer working the way it once did. And the bottom, another way to say it is, if it's all just fun, we don't call it an addiction. If it's still working, we just call it fun. We don't call it an addiction. It's not until it starts to cause some sort of problem, or internally it's just no longer working. It's no longer an effective strategy. And wow, how different it would be if we would all start looking at addiction in this new light. And that's my intention with conscious recovery. It's a worldwide movement. I would love to see it in every treatment program in the world. Why not have that as the big vision? Because I think it's time for a new paradigm. And that new paradigm is not staying in that shame and brokenness paradigm, but moving into this other possibility.
And you're saying you want to see it around, and I want to see it around, and I want to help you if I can in some way to get it at least in the UK. But how do you approach it with people who've just come into recovery or people who are still in active addiction? I mean, for example, in the fellowships and the 12 steps, I believe most of the fellowships, not all of them, insist that you are abstinent before you come in. I guess that's not the case with conscious recovery, or is that something? Is that a caveat before you start the conscious recovery program?
Well, so again, it's interesting, right? Because all of that is focused on a symptom. So in one way, I can say conscious recovery doesn't even have a perspective about that, because we want to meet people where they're at. So I think conscious recovery has helped people that aren't even in recovery. It helped people that are doing harm reduction, help people that are abstinent. My personal path is abstinence. That is what has worked for me. I know we've talked about this in another show. I love my life. I don't want to medicate that. So I love a life now. I have so much more love and connection in my life. So it's not really, conscious recovery isn't intended to have a point of view about that. It's intended to be a resource for someone to actually start exploring how they can heal the deeper root causes of their addiction and return to their own wholeness. So it's not a support group. It is really a book, a workbook, online experiences, and also at treatment programs, something that can assist someone in what the work they're already doing. So it's not an alternative to anything. It's an addition to whatever someone's doing.
And it can be done in groups and individually, I'm assuming.
Right. Yeah. In treatment programs, there's curriculum. We right now have close to 20 certified treatment programs, all on the West Coast of the United States, but that's changing very soon. I'll have a big announcement. We're about to announce a nationwide program is adopting conscious recovery. So that'll be fantastic. Yeah.
Fantastic. I've got a few messages. We've actually been talking, we've been going in depth, and I've ignored the messages. Debbie Garcia, my favorite guys. I thought I was the only one, TJ, but evidently not. Mess of messages. And this is from a YouTube message somehow, I believe. Hello, I'm watching from London. Hi, mess of messages, or if you do have a name, we'd love to say hi to you. Please reveal yourself. Angel, welcome back. We miss you. And as always, Angel is quite involved in what we talk about. And she's saying, wow, if had it like that 1 month now, I've been hurt, so I locked down. I feel need to connect my human and higher self closer. Yes. And she's got a couple of emojis with hands up. And then she goes, when it's your twin? So by hurting me, it's like he hurt himself too. Do you understand that question? Do you understand that? I'll ask Angel to try and...
Yeah, let's ask for Angel for more clarification. But I love what Angel's talking about with the merging, and I don't remember what word she used, but this idea that our higher self and our human self can become one. You know, we've in my first book, Conscious Being, I lay out 4 different levels of consciousness or conscious awareness, and basically we have been now, for hundreds of years or longer, we've been recognizing that we're actually spiritual beings having a human experience. Mm-hmm. I'm shifting that, as many of us are, to spiritual beings having spiritual experiences. In other words, what Angel's pointing to is, let's recognize that there's oneness. In other words, all those parts of myself that I called human are actually spiritual. It's all a spiritual experience. My friend Michael Beckwith says it this way. He says, we're not spiritual beings having a human experience. We're spiritual beings having a human incarnation. In other words, we are spiritual beings, and we're here on planet Earth to actually blend those, right? So I don't need to reject any parts of myself. And I think that we've been swimming in duality for so long that we often believe we have a spiritual self and a human self. What if it's truly all one? And I think that's what Angel's saying. Like, we're in a place where we're merging those. And the truth is they're already merged, but we're recognizing our own internal oneness now.
She actually uses the word connect, which is obviously the same thing. She's gone on to say from the last question, which we weren't 100% sure where she was getting at. She's saying, my twin flame hurt me, so he is also hurting himself, as we are one soul in two bodies.
Yes.
So she's talking about a spiritual.
Yeah. So there was a moment, and this will tell you how long it was. I was on a treadmill with a Walkman, so that's how long ago it was.
Walkman, God.
Walkman, right?
80s. We're talking 80s.
It might have been 90s. It was
early
80s.
90s. Early 90s.
I was on the treadmill and I was listening to my now friend Marianne Williamson, and she said, we tend to focus on finding our soulmate. What if every person on the planet is our soulmate? And there was something about her saying that, it just shot right through me, because I was like, oh yeah, we're all one. We are all one. And really understanding that more than a mental concept is profound, because we are starting to point to, even scientifically, a recognition that we're all part of one field. The mystics have been saying it for centuries. Now science is starting to catch up with this recognition that we're actually not separate. We're really not separate. We're all different particles of one energy. I think that's the Big Bang. We all came from one source, and we're all particles of that. So if I know that very, very deeply, then I'm no longer looking for that one person that's my soulmate. Now, we do encounter people on our path that just feel like, oh my gosh, I feel like I've come home when I meet you. So being harmed in that, for whatever reason, is a part of this experience. And that might change for us as our consciousness evolves. But at this point, it does seem like we have heartbreaking experiences. The way I say it is, we all have heartbreaking experiences. The question is, are we going to let it break our heart open? Right? Because sometimes, and I'm speaking for me, I would sometimes feel heartbroken and then close my heart, which is a natural response in a lot of ways. But can I stay open? And as Saf, you said it earlier, recognize that the experiences of my past can actually serve me, rather than having it as a reason to close off.
And we're not saying it was right or wrong, for that matter.
Right.
We're just saying just recognize it, address it, acknowledge it, for however long it takes for you to actually come out of it. Because sometimes you've got to be in it again to come out of it. If we ignore it and live in this one-sided fantasy, like everything's great, when you haven't actually addressed it or worked with it or whatever you may do with it, it will always be there.
Right. And that's the interesting, I think, paradox, because I think, a lot of people in spiritual circles, absolutely, I did this for a long time. We just wanted to move to everything is great. I'm grateful for everything. There's a benefit in this. There's a life lesson in this. And even though that's true on one level, there's also, as Saf is saying, there's also, and this hurts, and I want to heal this, and I want to feel this, and I want to make peace with this, so that I can move into the maybe greater reality, but even that's a construct, right? But this other reality of, oh my gosh, as painful as it was, it became a part of my healing, a part of my, and I think that's, for whatever reason, we come to planet Earth and we have these experiences of loss, of connection, of disconnection. And for some reason, we are here to explore that and to be with this experience that we call the human experience.
Human experience, yeah. And Angel's saying, thank you. It made me stop working. Yesterday, I start healing work again. Yeah. Okay, so and that's an important point as well. When someone comes into recovery, why do they stop doing what they were doing that keeps them whatever their goal is, whether it's controlled drinking or controlled whatever, or whether it's abstinence. Why do so many people relapse? Why do some people stop doing what they're doing when evidently it's working? Is it back to the disconnection again?
For me, I mean, I think there's not one way to answer it, right? There are many reasons someone might relapse. I have an experience, which is not just a belief, but an experience that if we don't heal the underlying issues that were actually driving the addiction, we're going to go back to it eventually. That's just been my experience. And it reminds me of, like, we offer people relapse prevention tools, or when you have a craving, do this. So if you're in 12-step, call your sponsor instead of drinking. But if we're at the point of craving, chances are, there's a percentage thing there, but we're highly likely to relapse once we're in the craving. It doesn't mean we don't use tools in the craving, but if we actually heal what's the underlying issues or the root causes, we're not going to go back to the craving as much. And so we don't want to blame ourselves if we're having craving. But I think when we heal those deeper issues and when we reconnect, because that's, I think, what you're pointing to, Saf, when I really know my true nature, when we really connect with our own wholeness, I think that relapse, it diminishes dramatically. And it's also a moment-to-moment choice, so that there are multiple layers to that question and answer.
I remember when I was in active addiction, even if I had a little thought that I want to have a drink or I want to have a drug, already I know I'm going to do it. Already, I remember one point when I was driving down, and I remember I had the loudspeaker on, and I was speaking to the wife, and I looked back, and I really feel that I wanted to have an argument with her, because I knew at the end of that road, if I take a right, I'm going home. If I take a left, I'm going to the drug dealer. By the time I was on that phone thinking that this has to turn into an argument, I've already made up my mind. I'm going to take a left every day.
Right.
All day long, I was going to take that left. Angel carries on, and thanks again, Angel. And she's saying, how can we put spiritual work before a relationship? I don't get that. I mean, if I may just say something very quickly on that, TJ,
Sure.
Please do continue. I guess when I came into recovery myself, Angel, and again, this is my experience, and not only from the 12 steps and other modalities that I was involved with, including other smart groups and other recovery groups. The one thing that came out to me was put yourself first, put your recovery first, focus on yourself, whether that's doing the conscious recovery way, which I knew then, or whatever it is. Put your recovery first. Otherwise, everything else around you may or may not be there. Is that what? Because if spiritual work is putting, if you're addressing and if you're applying spiritual work within your recovery before your relationship, that's putting yourself first, right?
Yeah, and I think, again, there's multiple ways to answer this, because in one way, relationships are incredibly spiritual. So what if they're not separate, right? What if my work in relationships is my spiritual work? And I think what Saf is saying is, in early recovery, it's easy to shift maybe from drinking to being in a relationship and focusing on that other person. And that was absolutely true for me, because just because I stopped drinking didn't mean I didn't have my umbilical cord in my hand trying to plug in to all these different situations. And what if we don't look at it through the lens of what's wrong or right, but like, is it effective for me to focus on the relationship right now? Or is it even more important for me to focus on my spiritual journey? And then I have something to offer the relationship instead of something to try to get from the relationship. So I don't think it's an either or. I think it's, I do my spiritual work. I recognize if I'm having attachments in relationships. Am I trying to get something from this relationship? Am I trying to offer something? There are a lot. We could do a whole show on relationships, which maybe we will. And I think what Angel's saying is, ultimately, the journey is spiritual in nature, and it really is an inside relationship with self. And I don't mean the personality self, but the spiritual self. And the more I am aware of my oneness with my spiritual self, the more I have to offer a relationship. And then relationships become about exchanging that instead of taking and giving.
I really want to talk about this program that I might be doing in the future, but I don't want to say anything because it's not happening. But and again, it's about relationships and about love and different things in recovery. So I'm not going to say anything about it, but it's going to be fascinating if it comes through. Kimberly, hi Kimberly. She's saying, "Oh dang, I just got home. I had to go to the store. I forgot about this. I need this deeply." Well, look, I mean, this is going to be on Conscious Recovery page, my Facebook pages, the Spirituality Gone Wild page. I'll keep on posting. Of course, you can check it out on YouTube as well. So please, and I know you will, but go back to it. Angel's saying, "Seek of fame, he put first." So maybe this is about someone else she's talking about, is it? I'm trying to comprehend.
Say it again, what she said.
Seek of fame, he put first.
Yeah.
I think she's talking about someone else.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that's, where the ego, let's put it this way, the pull toward living from ego is very seductive. That's why social media is what it is. That's why, news programs now are becoming more sensationalized, right? Breaking news, right? And that's, and part of that, I think that would be a fun show to do, Saf, like the impact of reality TV on consciousness, because wow, could we talk about that? But this idea of seeking fame and seeking notoriety and seeking attention or followers or likes, I mean, that's a very big part of our culture now. And it can be really seductive. And it is true, people end up seeking that. But really, I think what is a life that is really on purpose and with satisfaction is really about reconnecting with our true nature and being of service in the world. I don't remember who said it. It might have been the Dalai Lama. The world does not need more successful people. The world needs people who are willing to serve. And I think that's really true right now. So what do I do with people in my life that are seeking that? I recognize my oneness with them. I look at the ways that I seek that, because sure, it's the human experience. My ego always wants to seek notoriety or connect. We all have a different ego construct. The bottom line is what we're really hungry for, to take it back to that. I believe we're all really hungry for connection, and that connection is really a connection with our true nature.
Well, thank you.
And I know we're headed toward the end of the show. So
well, that's a beautiful point to finish on, but I am going to read Angel's last. She says thank you for that, and Kimberly too. Angel's last comment is, "I just need to focus on me and believe and be true to who I am." And that's exactly that. So thanks, TJ. Oh, God, today's been one of the quickest shows, actually. Even last week was quick, to be fair. But every week it just flies by. But thank you very much, TJ.
Yeah, and I want to offer Angel something too, because I was hearkening back to my first spiritual teacher, Mary Helen, because I was so, I remember this time I was struggling with all these different relationships, and she offered me a very simple spiritual practice to do every night before I went to sleep. And that was, imagine a cord, and for me it was light, connecting with every relationship in my life. And then imagine a huge pair of scissors, very gently cutting those cords and letting the people float away, and coming home to myself before I went to sleep. And that was something that helped me immensely. I did that for many, I guess months probably, of every night having that practice of letting people float away so I could really come home to my true nature and myself, and then, go to sleep with that deep connection. So that's something that's just practical that helped me a lot.
That's beautiful. I love that. Kimberly said a couple of things, and I think one you might understand. First, she goes, "Love you both, appreciate you so very much." And she goes, "Reply with a heart. TJ, Sunday service was great."
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I spoke at Agape Bay Area, virtually, of course, but this past Sunday, and thank you for that. Thank you.
Oh,
yeah,
she loved that, and she goes, "Oh yes, I can do that." So this is Angel the chord thing you just talked about. So, and thank you so much. Thanks, guys. Wow, thank you very much. Thanks, TJ, as always. Great show. And I think something tells me I want to talk about relationships next week.
Perfect.
I don't know if 45 minutes is going to be enough for that, but we'll try and get it in. But thanks, TJ. Thanks, guys, for watching. Mess of Messages. I want to know who you are, but thank you, Mess of Messages, whoever you are. Thanks, guys, for watching. It's been myself and TJ, Universal Recovery, back again, of course, next Tuesday, usual time. You can see me this Thursday, 8 p.m. UK, and of course Saturday and Sunday. Am I still doing it? Feel Good Factor TV, Sky TV. We've got a prime time on Monday, but I'll tell you about that next time. I just need to confirm that. But I'm Saf, this is TJ, and we are Universal Recoveries.